There are 2 final super chats from CW and Kevin Raymond. Thank you guys about specs. Which is no real surprise, because I think like as soon as Augvoker happened, that's literally it's the first time they've ever done that, and it's a new role in the game, which is crazy. As I guess we said in the video, where we really do want Augvoker to be a success, because it just cracks open the game so much. So CW said, make Survival Hunter a support tank. Do it, Blizz. The idea of a support tank. Now, you see, that is an interesting one, because Augvoker is really a DPS with a lot of utility. It's under the guise of a support because a lot of its DPS comes from other people and their performance. But second you try to do that with a tank, I think it you know, the way to do that with a tank is probably not to call it a support, but it would be a tank with a very specified kit.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's basically the same thing of you can't... it's weird. It would have to be damage, right? It would have to be like almost like the way we had support stuff implemented now with Augvoker as like the tip of the spear is the... What's the term I'm looking for? What's the legal term? Precedent? The precedent set by Augvoker is you give other people damage instead of doing your own damage. And that is very easily applicable to every role where you say, okay, well, tanks don't do much damage anyway. But what if they increased other DPS damage by a little bit? And that makes sense because the tank's always going to be there. And you're going to have maybe potential issues if you have a tank support and an Augvoker and kind of how that stacks together. But it's the same thing of
Blizzard
you
will probably
can
be
literally...
happy to just say like, well, that's bad comp craft, and actually we want to have all of these dynamic things in the game so that people feel like they can craft these different comps.
Yes and no. I think they'd be worried about
Mythic Raiders will go, stop being so prescriptive in your design.
I think they would mostly be worried about having real bad things happen as a result of that. They wouldn't want you to feel weaker because you're not Augvoker, but it'd be like, suboptimal's fine, but weak, no. So it very much works. You can have that. Okay, yeah. So you, instead of, you doing your own damage, other people do your damage for you, basically, because of what you do. And that would work, but with tank, that's a bit strange. You could have it passively a little bit, but it does run into the problem of, well, I suppose not really, because I'm thinking from the prot palette perspective, because that's the last tank I played, and you don't really make decisions on damage or survivability because your damage is Shade of the Righteous, which is also your survivability.
Yeah, you just hit buttons and the buff stacks.
Yeah, so that's not going to work particularly well for prot palette as an example, but if you think about like Vengeance Demon Hunter, which doesn't really do that much either, because Demon Spike's on a cooldown. Who does trade? Guardian Druids trade some because of core resource. Warriors trade some because of core resource. Brewmasters don't really, as far as I understand them. Death Knights don't really either. So it's a bit weird where it's only a small part of tanks actually swap that out, because you can either swap it out or not swap it out. As in, what decisions are you making as a tank? You're making the decision to, am I going to press this button to give everyone more damage, like I would on another spec press my own button to do more damage, or will I press the button and it makes me live a little bit longer? So that's a little bit more, like, I guess that would be fairly compelling. I don't know what, I had an issue with that in my head because I thought, well, what do you choose between damage and tank? And then I remembered half of them do anyway, so never mind. More or less, I've been an idiot, but my point was that Augvoker is one job, and its job is to do the damage that everyone else, and that will naturally flow. So maybe have to, I mean, they could do it, but it would be a little bit challenging to go, okay, well, how do we make this a compelling decision? But also, they like support stuff being easier, so it might end up just being when you press your, like, imagine Shield of the Righteous also, instead of, I don't know, it heals other people as well. Why does it not just... Or does it? Is that only for Holy and Red? I'm not actually completely sure. But anyway, you press your Shield of the Righteous, you press your Demon Spikes, you press your... What's the other example? Like Spirit Bomb. I suppose... basically you press Shield of the Righteous and it gives other people damage. Or is it you spend your Holy Power on give everyone damage instead of Shield of the Righteous? It's like, that's the main part I have to think about. But that's really, I'm just getting into the weeds for no particular reason here whatsoever, because it's ultimately I've decided they could totally do that, and that'll be fine.
I think my current suspicion is they should stick with adding a few things that play different to the Augvoker, but fill the same gameplay niche. Because fundamentally, this like DPS support thing, I feel like this needs to have enough options so that a role doesn't equal one single spec in the game.
Well, that's the thing where Augvoker isn't a role. Augvoker is just no, it's not. It's just the DPS because it's.
Well, yes, I mean that is how it's balanced.
Yeah, that's how it's balanced, and that's the design intent. And the reason I say design intent and don't go, well, in reality, they also have blistering skills, they also have their off healing and their healing taken increased by 6% talent and all the other stuff. You could, like, I'd say that, but I'd say design intent because who knows what Augvoker looks like in 10.2? Who knows what it looks like in 10.3 or 11.0? Who knows which power is taken away, which talents are removed if they're like, okay, well, say, blistering skills, maybe tank stuff's maybe not too important. So say, because I'm not super sure of how their talents are balanced, but they have that 6% healing taken increase talent, and the one that they can keep their buff up while pressing Emerald Blossom that costs essence, so they can trade off their own damage, but without impacting their buff. So kind of, the trade-off might be pretty small for a lot more healing. And that's where I'm sat here going, well, what does 10.2, and this is like, Blizzard do care about meta, they do care about that stuff. I know that they're caring less and less, but what happens when Mythic progression next time is full of Augvokers? Not because they do a bunch of damage, but because they also get that 6% healing. And then is that removed or nerfed heavily in the future? And does it all boil down to your DPS that does DPS via your mechanics changing on people? Up or charging people up, give them more stuff?
Yeah, I guess the more that they crack open supports to do different types of things, it'll be harder for them to fit that into the game because, yes, on Augvoker, it feels like it's carrying everyone, when in reality, it is sort of being carried by other people because it gets to, you know, in a way, it kind of gets to, like, vampire people's damage. I mean, it literally doesn't. It's design-wise, it's a really fascinating spec, basically.
It is, I think it's really well done.
To move on for, like, it is another interesting super from Kevin Raymond. It kind of hits some of the problem we've been talking about. Holy Support DPS Priest is a fourth spec to give them PI solves drama. Thoughts? Rename Shaman melee spec to something else. Add enhancement support melee spec. Yes, the idea of an enhancement shaman, you know, kind of over time, it's been more or less about said enhancements. It's funny with so I don't think a priest needs a fourth or anything, you know, or anything like that. I mean, that said, if you kind of had like a battle priest where you could bonk stuff, that would be kind of cool if you were going around with a gavel, but you also managed to make it not feel like a holy paladin that did damage. But anyway, imagine if PI was handled by Warcraft logs and advanced combat logging.
That will not happen.
Yes, it will not happen, but would it not be so goddamn funny? All the priests are just there being like, look at our extra damage. Yeah, we feel bigger now.
Yeah,
PI.
Just to kind of talk about that a little briefly, the reason I said it won't happen is because they basically said it won't happen because figuring out how much haste like it contributes to your damage is insane because it like works on so many different levels of like you could go, well, 20% haste is about 20% damage because you're hitting 20% faster. It's like, no, but then you get slightly more resources faster and then that fits into your cooldown windows better, which is kind of the whole thing of Unholy DK is like, why is it stronger on them? Well, they get so much more buttons during the gargoyle window and during army window, and that's what's like super important about it. And you go, okay, well, how do you calculate that? And the answer is they probably could, but it would likely destroy the servers figuring it out because they'd have to engineer, and they already said that the Augvoker combat log like engineering was a gargantuan task, and it was like only because I think it was Grim Burger was saying this. The only reason that they actually got to do it was because their engineers were just showed up real hard, went, we will make this happen. This is going to be a nightmare for us, but we will do it because we want to see this.
And it's the kind of thing you might just think like, it's numbers. Numbers are easy. Computer does numbers good. It's the sheer quantity of numbers going to so many different places and also servers. Big rip. Thank you for the super chat. With Evoker getting a third spec, do you think it's possible for Demon Hunter to get that same third spec treatment? If so, what would you like to see in that spec? Which is kind of interesting, and maybe my answer would have changed a while ago. Because you know the way, like, Havoc turned into John Madden very quickly?
Yeah, it sort of
so-
did this time round.
It's the challenging thing. I'm trying to think about like archetypes of demon hunters in the lore, and I can't necessarily think of one. Now, I don't know if this is just me being uncreative.
It's kind of weird because now we haven't talked about this on a Demon Hunter podcast, but Jared and I, for like members and patrons, we've been doing a series of class special podcasts talking about the lore and talking about all the different things that like, hey, this class does this. What's the basis of this?
Yeah,
And
range.
like, obviously they don't do ranged. Obviously, they don't heal, but that wouldn't make really a lot of sense for them generally. But Demon Hunter was so picked apart, and then they had to put it back together. But even back in the day, Demon Hunter was like, it didn't really have an awful lot to it.
God, when you say
It
back in
was-
the day and you're referring to Legion, that like
I don't mean Legion. Don't worry. I'm
Okay.
talking about
that
Warcraft
gives me
3.
the willies.
Yeah, I'm talking about Warcraft 3. So like, you've got Mana Burn.
Oh, Brat's Goddess.
Yep. Alari.
Larry the Soul Eater. One of the main Demon Hunter characters who fights with a two-handed scythe and uses hybrid ranged attacks. Oh, Red Mage. Two-handed scythe, Red Mage, hopping, skipping, jumping, flipping, shooting, and many other verbs.
It could potentially work, though. I think they're definitely a little bit concerned about doing like hybrid melee and ranged. I feel like they would need to play a very different game in order, or make a different game, sorry, to even do that, just because of how classification works. And that's even something that happens with,
Red Mage would be challenging in World of Warcraft with how it's designed.
yeah, like Red Mage is challenging in FF with how it's designed, because it's ranged, unless it's not. And there's just sometimes that can slip through the cracks of your timing in a fight, and it's like, oh yeah, well, you don't get a melee spot, so you don't get the uptime spot.
That being said, I am currently playing a hybrid ranged because as a Retribution Paladin, I can just sit there and throw shit at people and do like actually damage. It's wild. I mean, obviously, like, yeah, I don't get to have my like Crusader strikes when I'm not in melee, but it's kind of interesting how rangy they feel.
I think that is a little bit more as a, because they've always been like that. It's just a little bit more now because of how like their cooldowns have shifted around and things like that. And with the extra range on Templar's Verdict, which just seems like a quality of life thing as opposed to a specific design aspect of, oh, hey, we're going to do like this specifically. So I'm not really sure because
Okay.
you also lose auto attacks. So like, how do you have a spec that has auto attacks and you have ranged? Then
Right.
you're gonna have to go with.
You could do range auto attacks. So if Blizzard's willing to do new things, right, you could go for some ranged, ranged auto attacks. You're still going to need Fury, right, for your resource. Like let's just assume it's still Fury and Souls somehow. But then the issue is, how do you balance that? And it's kind of funny because the warlocks of various forms of it's like Demonology Warlock used to be you become a demon. Now Demon Hunter is the demon thing. Because if you're kind of like bringing demons in and using them, that's way too much overlap. So I guess we need a way for the soul generation to happen, because I think the idea of like harvesting the souls in from your opponent, that feels very Aflock.
I mean, it is also what like Vengeance does.
Yeah,
Vengeance is all about cleaving soul fragments out and then using them for Spirit Bomb and their Soul Cleave.
Maybe, do you know what it is, right? I think I'm just thinking about like the Aflock scythe. What was it, the scythe you got in Legion?
Yeah, the Affliction, the Affliction Legacy. What my brain doesn't work today. I'm very sorry. The Affliction Warlock artifact weapon was Ul Thresh or something along those lines. The Soul Render.
Sounds about right to me.
And it was. I don't even know how scythy it was outside of the Mage Star one being this beautiful, like, I think the base color was red. This beautiful big scythe.
That's neat. My idea is a hybrid, kind of like a hybrid FF14 Reaper, playing into the Jailer aspect. Not that one. It's okay. Of the Demon Hunter lore, like where they do have a lot of, like demons cooped up in their order hall and stuff. Yeah.
I mean,
that seems cool to me.
as long as it's the Jailer stuff of, hey, we're gonna like have all of these things we do to the enemy, as opposed to, hey, we have a load of demons in the background, because it feels like that's not really part of it. Yeah, Thresh.
Thresh is the league.
Thresh is the league.
Yeah, they
dude
kept
who,
on.
Yeah, he throws the
Yeah, and
scythe
I'd scream a
crap.
lot. Yeah, that. I remember League of Legends now. Ah, those were a fun few months. Yeah, all right, Thresh. Let's add Thresh to the game.
I don't know if I like that idea, but mostly because Death Knights would complain. Because they would lose their Death Grip unique class utility.
Oh yeah, they're also pretty thrashy.
Thresh has grip and his shield and his lantern. Everyone would complain because that would be a support demon hunter.
Well, it's also World of Warcraft. Everyone's going to complain anyway. Oh, well, you know what? I'm kind of down with a little bit of Thresh or a little bit of some kind of ranged. I suppose playing around with the Fel, like the actual greenness of the Fel in a way that's more just because a Destruction Warlock is very much fueling what looks like a lot of chaosish fiery magic stuff, and yeah, you can turn it into green fire, but you know the way there's that kind of different Fel, I don't know, more primalish sort of Fel or something. Feels a bit more goopy, feels a bit more legiony, or maybe this is just me being stuck between a version of something that was kind of art directed more in MoP. So it's more just Blizzard's art direction changing.
I think that's
probably mostly what's in my head, yeah.
That's most of what happens here, I think, a lot of the time when it comes to the magical things. But John brings up something good, which is Nicky on our team is a dancer player in FF14. He loves dancer, he loves how simple it is, and he loves the supporting aspect, but he also loves Demon Hunter. So I don't know how you put those two things together, but every single time this is brought up, he goes, "Can I have my glaive throwing ranged dancer spec for Demon Hunter, please? Can I please have that?" And every time, not in a million years, bud, not a chance. I hope you do, but not a chance. So maybe they will go for, because I think that's one thing they've been kind of toying with is having the glaive throw as a lot more of rotational, because obviously with a couple of talents where for Havoc it actually does go in that way, where it gets a load of bonus damage and starts doing other things as well, like AoE. So I think something else there would be cool if they just go, hey, you can just throw your glaives all the time, and maybe it would be a different maybe they would be, actually that's a good point, because there's no class in the game that currently uses throwing weapons as a weapon, but throwing weapons are a weapon in the game.
True. Yeah. Or those were a thing you could just throw on in your warrior or your rogue back in the day.
Yeah, rogue? Rogues actually start with them in Classic, just to hear some throwing knives.
Isn't that some crazy shit?
Yeah, it's fun.
Man. Okay, well, there you go. And I guess the other thing is, now that Augvoker is a thing, we can actually start to think about new specs, because it could actually be that for a lot of people, obviously, yes, Bard fans, Tinker fans, but there's probably a lot of people as well where, if they found out, okay, there's a new Shaman spec. Think about, the 20 or just shy of 20 years of World of Warcraft Shamans who are going to look at that and be like, oh, a new Shaman spec. In the same way that with Legion, Blizzard were able to say, hey, here's a humongous amount of new class content, let's go. And people came back in kind of droves.
Yeah, that's a pretty good point for them being one of the most iconic parts of World of Warcraft in history. Although I did get a Balkan the other day because I spat true facts. And they were pure fire, and people were like, no, that Jesus meme of they hated him because he told the truth. That was me, because I said, what are the two most popular classes played in World of Warcraft?
Hunter.
Generally, let's exclude Paladin because it got the big buff goodie now. But it's always been Druid and Hunter. I don't really know why Druid, to be honest. It's been a weird thing for me seeing that all the time. Obviously, everyone gets Hunter. So, if you want people to come back to the game and you want the most effective way you could put developing a new spec in, then you wouldn't go Demon Hunter. There's plenty to play them. You wouldn't do Monk. No one plays that. You would you would give Druid a 5th spec. And give Hunter a 4th spec.
Matt.
You would give Hunter Bard instead of Rogue, even though Rogue makes more sense, and you would give Druid a new form that's a support form.
Your brain drip is hella weak. I think that's how you're supposed to talk.
I have no idea. I don't know anyone younger than me.
Yeah. I'm trying.
I'm
I'm trying to expand our demographics to all of the new World of Warcraft players who are fresh and young. They're like, I'm 21. I'm 21. I'm American and now I can drink alcohol and play World of Warcraft. I don't think that's actually happening, sadly.
I feel like you would need to be drunk to play World of Warcraft if you're a Zoomer. It's very slow.
As a recent clip of a Firebrand commentator nut job I once heard is, I drink depressants because I'm so alive I can't handle it.
I don't know if that's how young people today really feel, or how World of Warcraft players feel. Well, maybe.
It's funny with WoW. I've been getting into a really good groove with things. You know, it's like, I don't know if it's just I'm vibrating at the same resonance. Okay, no, I'm going to start talking about the crystals or some weird shit. But I don't know. I'm really meshing with WoW like really well these days. It's like it's nice.
Nice anecdote, loser. That's not scientific.
Oh, damn. N equals 1. My own opinions are invalid.
Yeah, no, honestly, it's like, well, time rifts do a big job of, hey, you want to just log in every hour and play for like 10 minutes. You're here anyway, might as well
Like
do something
Pomodoro
else.
technique.
Basically, yeah.
Right? Like, I don't need a Pomodoro timer anymore. I'm just like, washing machine. Look at my dishes. Sit in the void for half an hour. Go back to World of Warcraft because I'm pulled out of the void. It's fantastic. Every hour I get about 5 minutes of productivity and about 30 minutes of wishing I was doing something useful. Brilliant. But actually, it's funny. It's a good enough pace, but if there was an Obsidian Citadel in between that wizard or anything like that, oh dear, people would just, like full-on South Park episode. They just be like, oh my god, 6 hours have passed. I am the Time Rift man.
I think that's maybe what they're a little bit worried about, just for the reason if you can't give people too much juice, or you can't set people beside a juicer that runs forever because they will juice themselves.
Is that true? I don't think they will.
No, I was having a thought about this where, you think of, like, why was Zarlak so kind of, you can do some rares. Why is 10.1.5 like time rifts? This is your life now. But then the Dream Surges are like, here's some gear you might or might not need. Or like they're clearly, I think they're moving around the kind of thought of we cannot just reward players too much or they'll burn their reward systems out. We have to like actually pace it so they feel excited every like couple months instead of all the goddamn time.
Well, you see, I log into my new Paladin and I'm thinking, okay, gonna get gear, gonna do things, woo! And to me, Zarlak Cavern equals pre-made group finder, researchers under fire, get a 12 out of 12, do 3x sniff and seeking. Doesn't exist anymore.
I don't get a 12 out of 12.
I got one in it.
What sort of privilege are you operating on here?
I'm operating.
I haven't seen anything above a 9 in my life.
Man, I'm operating in sheer skill. Yeah.
So, if you ever see any raid footage in our videos from a disc boost perspective, you may be able to
Lamau.
Oh dear.
Yeah, but like that's the thing with Zarlak. It just so quickly. It didn't have the pace and the way the things worked, the wee fragrant coins or whatever that you got from doing like basically those public events never really felt that rewarding, bar the bare minimum for the extremely throttled Drake. Like Drake crests. And then Whelpling crests, you so rapidly no longer need Whelpling crests if you do like literally anything else in the game. Or even for somebody who Whelpling crests should be a bit more relevant to, like do a few LFRs, you'll have plenty of Whelpling crests, right? So it's weird. It's like the stars did not align for Zarlak, even though I'm still convinced that like there's a way that could all tie together. I mean, I don't know if it's you make it so that say whenever you do a public event, you juice up those rewards a bit more. Maybe the public event makes it more likely for researchers under fire to happen. Not more likely, sorry, fills up a bar. You have, basically I'm talking about Guild Wars 2 Zone Metas, and now that I've said that, we don't have to have an entire conversation. So then, let's move on to what's happened in the game this week.